Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Alumni Q&A brought to you by the Alumni Association here at the University of Michigan. This is a part of a somewhat regular series that we've tried to implement, in which we give alumni an opportunity to hear from campus leaders about things that are going on here at the university that affect the university and our alumni. And we have a wonderful guest here today for me to be able to talk to. I'm really looking forward to hearing some of these answers myself. Dr. Martino Harmon is the university's vice president for student life. And he came to us fairly recently, last year, from Iowa State University, where he held a similar position. I was pleased in looking at his background to know, and from talking with him, that he's got some good history here in this area, down in Toledo, did his educational work down in Toledo, but also worked for a while at Washtenaw Community College early in his career. So it's good to have you back home, Dr. Harmon. We're really excited to have you. And one of the interesting things about him is that he started really like just a few weeks after the beginning of the pandemic. The Regents named him, and so what a way to start. But let me just let me ask you. You might want to reference that, but let me just ask you to let our listeners get to know you a little bit. Tell us about anything about you'd like to share about yourself, or how you got into this position. What made us so lucky is to be able to get you at the University of Michigan.
Well, Steve, first of all, I want to start by thanking you and the Alumni Association for inviting me to this conversation. And it's good to be here. And I look forward to seeing you on campus. And I'll try to get over. I think you serve donuts every now and then. I think on Wednesdays, I believe. So I'll try to make sure I can get over and just help sample some of the donuts with the students. So,
well, you'll have to stand in line and fight the students for them, because they grab them quickly.
I'll let them go first. I'll just take the leftovers. But thank you. And your introduction, you said someone wonderful is coming on, a wonderful guest, and I was waiting for someone else to come on the screen. So, but thank you very much. Yeah. I do appreciate those kind comments in the introduction. I am so excited to be here. I have a very extensive background in not only student affairs and student life, but also in retention and student success, as well as enrollment management. That's not part of my role here, but I started my higher ed career in enrollment management, and that gave me a really broad perspective of institutions and how they work, and spent a lot of time at Toledo, some time at a few community colleges in between in leadership roles, and as you mentioned, a brief stint at Washtenaw Community College. I was commuting from Toledo, but that was my first taste of Ann Arbor. So that was also a good moment in my career. And then went to Iowa State University, a place where I really didn't know anyone, and just embraced a new opportunity there, first as associate VP and then as senior vice president for student life, a large institution, very decentralized, not quite as large as University of Michigan, but a real large institution. Right. And so I just had a diversity of experiences. But I'll tell you, I was very happy at Iowa State University and not really thinking about leaving, but I had an opportunity. I was contacted by a search firm about this opportunity, and I thought, I think I need to at least put my hat in the ring. University of Michigan is a special place. This is a special opportunity. It was a growth opportunity for me, and and something special happened that should have been a sign. ESPN Game Day came to Ames, Iowa for the first time in September of 2019. And I met a very famous alum, Desmond Howard. We're both from Cleveland. Yeah. And we made that connection, had a little conversation with him. Little did I know at that time that I would be joining the team here at the University of Michigan. So maybe that was a sign, but it was just a great opportunity. And I was very, very honored when President Schlissels appointed me. And ironically, my last interview was about 3 weeks before COVID started. And we talked about coming back for a nice reception and the Regents meeting people, shaking hands. And then 3 weeks later, the whole world changed. Yeah. And so I started in July of 2020. and had a very challenging and
Mhm.
different kind of first year behind the screen. Not typically how you would start a job like this. So a lot like the freshmen, like the new students. I'm sorry, a lot like the second year students. I had a very different first year. So I'm
Right.
so excited this year to really be able to come out and experience the University of Michigan. So it's been a challenging ride, but I'm honored and humbled to be here, and I'm really excited about the future.
Well, you know this story, but I want to let our listeners know this background about you. I have a very dear friend who happens to be my counterpart at Iowa State University. He has the same role there that I do here. And not long after you were named, he and I connected. And the wonderful things that he said about you, and I know you have a good friendship with him as well, but he's somebody I really trust. And the things that he said about you, I know that our students are going to get great service and support and leadership and guidance from you and your team because of the kind of person he described you to be. And so I'm really glad you're here. I think it's good for all of us.
Dr. Jeff Johnson and I work closely together, and I'm going to send him a dozen donuts for
Yeah, good. Well, we talk about that first year in COVID, and of course this year is different. I'm thinking about all of our alumni, for instance, who are parents, who have parents of current students, or they're probably wondering what is it like this year? How is it for our students? Are many of the classes online? How are we making sure that they're safe and they're able to participate, not just in the classroom, but in some of their outside activities? Can you talk a little bit about how students are being looked after in this continuing COVID crisis?
Certainly, and I sent two daughters to college there. They made it through those processes, so I understand the role of being a parent and sending students to college and how it's exciting, but it's also you worry about them and you want to make sure everything is going well. And certainly we have taken so many precautions, and we have so many support systems in place because we're excited that we're back to a near normal residential experience. But we also know that COVID's not over, and we have to keep our students and the community safe. So, just a few things to mention. The Dean of Students office has a number of support mechanisms for students, as do all of our departments. But they really are a good office to make sure that if students don't know where to turn, that's a great place to turn to. And they have a variety of connections with the academic units. If students need flexibility, accommodations, they can work with them. We have our health and wellness units, whether it's University Health Services, which provides of course, the clinical work, the testing, and so forth. We have Wolverine Wellness, which has a lot of wellness coaching, a lot of strategies for coping with some of the challenges that we're all dealing with throughout this pandemic. And we've expanded our testing. We know that testing is not the cure for COVID, right? Vaccine is really the key, but expanding testing, especially when we're getting into cold and flu season and students aren't sure, do I have a cold or do I have COVID? The best way to know and to keep the community safe is through access to testing. So we've really expanded that. But then we've done some other things that seem simple in nature, but just providing canopies on campus where students can study. They can eat outside if they're not comfortable eating inside. They can sit and talk with friends outside, and until it gets really cold, the canopies are helpful. I've actually sat under the canopies a couple of times myself, just wanting to get the outdoor experience. To your question about classes, I talked to Provost Collins. I want to make sure I give her credit for this information. About 90% of the classes are in person, and about 6% are hybrid, a mix of virtual and in person, and about the other 4% are virtual classes. And that may be based on the nature of the class or just the ability to use technology in a better way. So we're trying to mix in support, access to resources, testing, and just to make sure we can be responsive to all students. And the vaccine rate for our students is around 96, 97%.
Yeah.
And that is probably the most impressive thing that we can point to. Students are very willing to submit their vaccine information, and we're masks or face coverings are required indoors.
I sort of kept up with the work that you and your fellow executive officers of the university did to try to make sure that we could come back to the classroom and come back to campus safely. And I know that you put a lot of time and a lot of thought into it, and it seems to really be paying off. I mean, yes, there are some cases, breakthrough cases where people get COVID even if they've been vaccinated, but fortunately, we've not had any really serious health issues as a result of this. And I give you all a lot of credit for helping us get to this place.
Well, it's a real partnership, a collaborative approach, and knock on wood, you know, we hope that we can stay on this course. Our positivity rate is slightly less than 2%, which is really good. Right now, I think we have 12 students in quarantine and isolation. It's out of 50,000 students.
That's amazing.
So all signs are good so far. So hopefully we can keep it going.
You know, these questions have come in from alumni, and one alum wrote, and this one happens to be the parent of a first-year student, and they're asking about. I think this is a really great question, asking about how the university helps, particularly new students, to establish and foster relationships. You know, how do you help these students find their way in a university as big as the University of Michigan? You just mentioned 50,000 students, you know, so how does one student find their way in that?
You know, Steve, this is important for all particularly large public institutions. And it's something I believe we've gotten a lot better at since, you know, my early days in higher education. And some of those strategies that we use at the University of Michigan, it may seem obvious, but some of our large lecture classes, they are broken down into smaller sections, smaller study groups where students can hear the lecture from, you know, a faculty member, but then have smaller groups where they may be working with a teaching assistant, or maybe even the faculty members engaged with the smaller groups. And that allows for more interaction and discussion. So that's really one strategy in the classroom, but there are a number of different strategies and courses that really help to make the University of Michigan smaller and help students find community. So courses, for example, through our intergroup relations department, and it's all about how students engage with each other and talk about difficult and tough topics in constructive ways, or our first year experience courses, which really teach students how to navigate the university, or a course called, I think it's called Making, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember this one, Making the Most Out of Michigan course, which is really helping students to understand how to make the university and Ann Arbor work for them. So some of those courses really help a lot. But then I would also say an important aspect of students finding community is through living learning communities within the residence halls. You know, whether it's a theme community based on common interest, or whether it is a Michigan learning community that's tied to an academic experience. So now you're in a residence hall in a larger community, but now you have a community within a community that you can connect to. And even for diversity, education and experiences, there are diversity peer educators, multicultural lounges. So we take the residence hall experience and make that smaller. And then finally, within student organizations and clubs and events, that is another way. I would say to all parents and family members, if your student is not connecting, send them to the Center for Campus Involvement, even if they go to the website and just look at the over 1,400 student clubs and organizations and find something, make a connection with the group, and we can help the students do that, or just attend some events where you'll meet people and make friends. So a number of different approaches, they're all relevant, all useful. And that's the way we make the university smaller.
You know, it's interesting as listening to you say that, it confirms what I've believed about the University of Michigan for several years as I've watched this, and then as a parent, seeing it through the life of my own kids. I was talking to a high school senior just this morning about possibly coming to the University of Michigan, and we were talking about the difference between a large university like ours and a small, and what you get in each of those. And I said what a lot of people have said over time: you can always make a large university small by finding your place and your community within it. You can, if the university is as committed as we are, find your community. It's harder to make a small university large and have some of the things that come with some of the good things that come with that. But I really do think that that we have here at Michigan, there are the opportunities for you to find that community. You just described them well. So I appreciate that. Sometimes those turn into challenges, those relationships, and we one of the questions that came in from an alum has to do with that challenge, and particularly we hear about it so much in society today. This seemingly lack of unity among the population in large. What about on campus? I mean, what are we doing to try to help students be able to manage this notion of disagreeing, but not hating? Those are my words, but you understand my question. What's going on there?
Steve, it is a real challenge, but this is a great opportunity. There is no better place for people who are in college to really get to learn, listen to, connect with people who have views, backgrounds, experiences that are different from theirs. It's almost the perfect opportunity in life before you go out into the workforce to have that experience, whether you're attending programs and events that are sponsored by groups that are different or that have different viewpoints than yours, or whether you're just connecting with someone in your class through a study group. That's a learning opportunity. It could be something as simple as you're in a line at Subway on campus or at Panda Express, and you just chat with the person who is behind you or in front of you, and you're going to learn something just from that exchange. But the university has some real formal ways of promoting engagement with people who have different viewpoints. One I would mention through student life is the Ginsberg Center, the Edward Ginsberg Center for Community Engagement. And that is a program that is deeply rooted in campus and community connections. It's connected, well connected through the academic units, and faculty are very engaged, and it allows students to make an impact through community engagement in their community, but also to understand the important issues of the day and to be able to dialogue and connect with other people. So that's one great example. I mentioned IGR, intergroup relations. They have a course, or courses rather, that allow students to tackle tough, sort of challenging issues. And then I would also mention, just again, student organizations. There are student organizations that you may be in one organization that has one view, but you could partner with another organization on an event, or just attending organization events in and of itself. And the last thing I'll mention briefly is within student life, we have about 20 different student advisory boards. And I have my own student advisory board, and they do a wonderful job of helping me get information. But that group is made up of people of really different backgrounds. And it's so wonderful to see them connecting together as a group. And they may tackle some issues where they may not all agree, but they've developed relationships that they are doing exactly what we want them to do. So a lot of ways to do it. In college is the time and the place, but it's not easy, and we have to keep working on it.
I appreciate that. And I'm guessing those students don't have a hard time telling you what they feel either, do they?
Oh, they're not shy at all. So absolutely.
Well, that's good. We need to hear every voice, and they're important voices, especially when it comes to things like that. You mentioned earlier, this is related to one of the questions I saw that came in. You mentioned that this was sort of like, you've had two experiences, two COVID years now, or you're in your second, I should say. What about first and second year students who've come to Michigan? If they're in their second year, their first year was shut down, and now if this is their first year, it certainly is different than pre-pandemic. What's it like for them trying to find their way at Michigan?
Steve, this is something that we started really thinking about, really in great detail late fall of last year, 2020, and certainly in the early part of winter term. How are we going to plan for a returning group of students who had a really challenging first year, and then a group of new students who if they came from high school, or even if they transferred in, had a really challenging end of their high school or transfer experience. How do we make sure that we are aware of the best way to really help those students? And when student life and academic affairs or enrollment management work to plan the Welcome to Michigan program, we made some pretty significant changes. One, it used to be a week sort of intensive welcome programming. And this year it was about 3 weeks of intensive programming. And we just called it Welcome to Michigan, not Welcome to Michigan Week. And within that, we had certain events that were geared for all first and second year students.
Yeah.
For example, convocation. Normally we have, I guess, about 6,000 students, and convocation is that opening sort of ceremony that formally welcomes students in the big house. But this year, because it was first and second year students, we had over 10,000 students attend convocation. And that was wonderful because those students last year didn't get a convocation, and certainly not one in the big house. So that's one example. But then we had some events that were just for second year students. So second year students, we had a sophomore celebration, and they could pick up a t-shirt with 2024 on it. And I can't tell you, it was so crowded. So many students came out, outside, and it was just a wonderful event. We had music and ice cream. And there were a number of events like that where we either focused on first year students, or it was for all first and second year, or some tailored to second year students. And the jewel of the Welcome to Michigan experience, where we had a concert, and it was in Chrysler. It was only open to first and second year students who had followed the vaccination protocol.
Yeah.
And the group called Glass Animals. Trust me, I never heard of Glass Animals, but that's a good thing, because if it's a group that I've heard of, they're not going to want to see
yeah, you and me both.
Right. But they were so excited and so appreciative. And the students, that place was rocking. So, I mean, that's just one example. There are many other programs, whether it be through first year experience programming or through just some of our engagement strategies. We have a group called Resource Navigators that just do a touch point about midway in the semester to reach out to about a couple, 2,000, 3,000 students and say, how are you doing? So just sort of things like that to check up on them. But we really started with a strong Welcome to Michigan program.
Well, the students that I talk to appreciate that. I've heard from a number of those students when I interact with them. We have students, that connect with us, and the experience that they're getting this year. I think the students are really, really happy to be back on campus, and they are. They feel like it's a good experience. And those who are juniors and seniors will acknowledge it's not what it was before, but they don't say it's worse.
Right.
It's just different. And and they're having a good time. I think it probably doesn't help that the football team is 5-0, right?
That definitely helps. And I actually, I'll mention it if time permits, but I had my first time in the big house.
Oh yeah.
That was really exciting. But you could feel, Steve, you could feel the excitement. You could feel the energy. Students are excited to be back, and they're nervous, about COVID. I don't want to diminish that, but they're excited to be back, and they're trying to do everything they can to make sure that it's a smooth semester.
They are, and they're following the rules. I've been really impressed with how they're doing that.
Very much so.
Absolutely. Just talking about that excitement, one of the questions that we got was about North Campus. When I came here, there was this strong sense that North Campus was very different, and I'm just going to be blunt and say almost kind of dead. It just was not a place that students wanted to spend a lot of time. I've seen a lot of the changes that have happened up there. Physically, a lot of things have changed, but my sense is that the energy level has changed. Can you talk some to alumni, including many who were in engineering or architecture or whatever, and they spent a lot of time up there and saw it differently than it is today? Can you just kind of describe what's going on up there today?
Yeah, Steve, one of my goals since they let me out of my COVID cave is to get over and really feel the energy at North Campus more. I've been over a couple of times, but I need to get over there more often. But I have certainly the times that I've been there. And what I've heard is there is a lot more happening at North Campus. And there are a couple examples. I may have to just look at the names because I don't want to mess up the names of these places. But the Gerstacker Grove. Now, I haven't seen that yet, so
Yeah.
I'm telling you, next week is a goal for me to see it.
Yeah.
But it was created in 2015, and it was really a renovation of the outdoor. I think it's called Lurie Bell Tower.
Right.
They're familiar with that. So it was really a renovated area that has more seating, space for volleyball, games, more programming. So that renovation in and of itself, has added to the life on North Campus. The Fireside Cafe in Pierpont was renovated in 2014. I have seen that before. And again, that's just a gathering place, a place to, sit and find community. It's a really neat, kind of cozy setting. And I know for a fact that we have some really big plans in the future for housing and dining over on North Campus. And that was paused, right, obviously because of COVID. But we are just starting the discussions again about those plans. And I think, once we can launch that, that will be a game changer. That will really transform North Campus. And I know that that is a priority for the institution. And there are other buildings that were opened or renovated that are outside of Student Life's purview, but there's certainly an effort to enhance North Campus for sure.
Absolutely. And one of the places that I love to go, my wife and I will often go up there, and it's for our alumni listening, some of them will not have seen it because they haven't been back in a few years, or at least on North Campus, but the Walgreen Drama Center, within it, the Arthur Miller Theater is just one of the most incredible places to watch a small performance. It's like the old In the Round kind of theater, except it's square, but it is there's not a seat in the place where you don't feel like you're almost on stage with the actors. And these students perform there a lot. It's a great place. I encourage you I know with pandemic you haven't been able to get up there. We haven't been able to get up there, but now that things are loosening up, I encourage you to think about that, even for yourself. It's a great place.
That's on my list.
Yep, you'll love it. You'll love it. I want to switch a little bit and turn to a topic that is not easy to talk about, because it still just breaks our heart, to think about what we've learned about the Dr. Anderson issue here on campus, and the inhumane things that happened really very long time ago, but that we're just getting to now. Can you talk just largely for parents, but for all alumni really, who may think that this is not a safe place for students when it comes to things like this, because they are hearing today about something that happened decades ago. Can you talk a little bit about what do students do if they feel like they're being harassed or abused in some way? What do you have in place to help students today? Because unfortunately, these things do happen.
Yeah, and first of all, Steve, I want to just take a moment to say that my heart goes out to all the victims, the people who were and are affected by such a heinous and just terrible set of actions. Really sad and unreal. I would also acknowledge that some of the new initiatives that students and families and alums may hear about, they really are an effort of continuous improvement. So certainly we've learned a lot from that horrible experience, but we've also always been concerned about making sure that there was proper reporting, proper support for victims, but also prevention services to help educate what students and the community of appropriate behavior. So just a few examples. SAPAC, and always, we get these acronyms and I always try to make sure I say the whole thing, but SAPAC is a Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Center, and that is a nationally known program that has a good number of staff and over 200 students who work to educate, to enlighten, to help other students understand prevention, to have support for people who have been impacted by sexual assaults. And that program is really a nationwide leader. I heard about that program before I came to the University of Michigan. Of course, we have OSCR, which is our Office of Student Conflict Resolution, which is the accountability portion of that for students. But in general, the university has really adopted some new policy and procedures around reporting. And this is all effective October 1. And this is in the University of Michigan policy and policy on sexual and gender misconduct and standard practices guide. So it really outlines a set of procedures that have been really the whole campus community reviewed and adjusted to make sure that they were appropriate for our time. But also part of that is the restructuring of the Title IX office, which now reports directly to President Schlissels, and really aligns the office in a better way. And will also include some increased staff and some units that'll be able to focus more. So all of that, in addition to courses through FYE that help students understand, they're coming to college for the first time, what is appropriate behavior around respect and treating people in the appropriate way. So we have been doing a lot, but we're trying to do more. And we want to make sure students are supported and they make good decisions.
Well, as a parent of a former student, and as many of our alums are, they're former students themselves, I feel compelled to say this is a very important issue to our alumni. They care about it deeply. They many of them, I think, feel either they feel it for their children or they felt it for themselves or whatever, and it's something that matters to them a lot. And so I want to tell you, I appreciate your sense of really, I can tell it matters to you personally. And we need that from this office, I think, for our university to go forward, from you and from the president.
Thank you.
Yeah. Speaking of President Schlissels just this week announced that he is going to be stepping down a year earlier than we thought he might. I mean, you never know. Some of us think, how can any president these days live through a pandemic, right? It's so hard. But he announced that he would be stepping down at the end of I believe the end of the 22-23 school year.
Right.
How does that impact your role and students?
Yeah, certainly I've been and am still honored to work with President Schlissels. He brought me to the University of Michigan. He's a great leader, a great person to work for and to work with. Yeah. And I was sad to hear the announcement, but also happy for him that, he has a sense of clarity in terms of his future and what he wants to do in his next adventure. So I'm excited for him. But, I know that my focus and the focus of the Division of Student Life is to do great work for students, to support students in terms of their success, to deliver on our core work, to deliver on our priorities, and for me personally to be the best vice president for student life that I can be. And I'm going to continue to serve President Schlissels until his last day, and when a new president is named, I'll be certainly in a position to serve that new president. So for me, it doesn't change what I do on a day-to-day basis. But there's a little sadness, but also happiness and understanding President Schlissels and his decision.
Well said. Thanks. Speaking of looking forward, maybe we could just take a little bit to kind of hear about some of your ideas about what's ahead for student life as you look to the future, and hopefully a future that is not held down so much by a pandemic.
Well, Steve, it's interesting because I would say in my first 6 months, maybe even 9 months, it was really hard to even think beyond the immediate, because every day with COVID, there was a different high stakes decision, a different crisis, a different pivot. It was hard to think beyond the next few weeks, because you just didn't know what was coming down the pike. And so it was really refreshing, really probably when I got to maybe February or March, to really start to think about the forward movement of the division. And it was hard for me to really know student life being virtual and not really interacting with people. And so I've given a lot of thought, we had a strategic planning process over the summer where we call this the year of transition this year. And, we'll make adjustments that will get us through this year, but then plan for our next strategic planning process in the future. But, when I look at our priorities and my priorities, there are a couple of areas that I really want to focus on. One is around student health and well-being. And that's not just mental health, but the overall student well-being, harm reduction. And that is so critically important. It was important before the pandemic. And one of the things that I did was partnered last year with the provost, and we put together a dynamic committee of all-stars. I kind of call them the Avengers of student health delivery, like superstars. And we said, let's look at where we are. Let's think about innovation. Let's think about how we fill the gaps. And the reason why that was important, Steve, is because we focused so much on one support system, which is CAPS, counseling and psychological services. But really, we're not thinking about how do we make this a holistic, comprehensive approach? How can we meet students along a continuum of needs? Every student doesn't need to see a therapist as the first stop. There are technological tools, there's preventive tools, there are people who can engage with students, there are trained peers that can help. And so they delivered some great recommendations that we're actually acting on, several of them right now. So that's one big priority. Another priority is our communications within a division. We were changing our communication structure before the pandemic. That got paused. And so I am now rethinking that, and we'll be making some real big changes so that we can be more active, more progressive in social media, with our websites, with video. We have a lot of opportunities that we need to really seize on. And then also thinking about lessons we learned from the pandemic, about how to engage with students in innovative ways, but also how to meet the needs of students who are underserved, students who really need extra help through our Dean of Students office, whether it be emergency funding, whether it be just various forms of support and care. So that's critically important. And then lastly, this ties in with our priorities around strengthening partnerships within the division and also outside of the division and in the community, and demonstrating our impact. We don't just house and feed students, but our role is really to help student success. And we're doing a lot more around assessment and research to demonstrate the impact of the work we do. That's a handful. But I've got a great team.
Yeah, any one of those things alone would be a handful. I think about the first, and just to offer you a little bit of feedback, I heard from an alum just within the last couple of weeks who had been talking to students and just, kind of getting some feedback. And one of the things that they said was that students are asking for more support in wellness, and I think back to when you and I were in school, and I'm probably 100 years older than you, but when we were in school, it was not actually something you talked about that much, or that you even thought that you could get help for, And I really appreciate that today's students are willing to get help, but we need to make sure that we're providing it for them. I mean, I tell our staff team at the Alumni Association from time to time that if they need help, to ask, because I know personally I've benefited from that kind of help from counselors and others in my own life. And so I believe it's something we all need to think about. And if there's anything that we as an association could do to help you on that front, I just think it is so important to students and so important to alumni that we would do whatever we can to be helpful to you in that goal of yours. So,
well, I appreciate that. And we, our goal in making this a holistic support is really all hands on deck. Everybody can play a role given the appropriate training, and important to let students know all the avenues of help. So thank you.
Well, and so all hands on deck. we have 630,000 pairs of hands that, for the most part, all want to be on deck. As I talk to alumni, and I say, how would you like to get involved? What would you like to do, in terms of reconnecting or whatever? Almost without exception, it comes up that they love to interact with students. And, I think in some ways that, interacting with a student today carries me back to that time when I was a student. But more than that, I think they really just believe it's a way that they can carry on the mission of the university, to provide education and that kind of support. And yet I will tell you that it's not easy to make that happen in a meaningful way for both the alumni and the students, because a lot of times alumni will say, well, I'm ready, just call on me anytime. Students don't always call.
Mm-hmm.
They will say, oh, I'd love to have mentoring, for instance, from an alum, but then they might be a little hesitant to take advantage of it. So do you have some thoughts about how you think alumni can be helpful to students or to your team or anything like that? I know our alumni would love to hear from you on that.
Sure, and some of this is from even my experience outside of the University of Michigan, but one in particular that I want to make sure I mention, and it's a little bit of a play on words, like tell them you can, because there's actually something called the University Career Alumni Network, and that is a direct opportunity that alums can register for, and it's really a career mentoring. It's a way to connect students to people who are in careers and professions. Right. And I recognize, sometimes we tell students, okay, here's someone you can contact, and they may not always do that. And one of the things that I want to look at as I learn more about that particular opportunity is I find that sometimes students need to be in small groups as opposed to expecting them to make that contact on their own. And again, I'm still learning about that program. Yeah. So I may be saying some things that are already happening, but I find that sometimes if you build little mentorship kind of groups, the group interaction is a lot easier than the one-to-one. That's right. But the first step is for alums to get involved and connect with that you can through the University Career Center. Second is a big connection. If alums have been involved in the fraternity, sorority community, that's a softball, because that is a real easy way for them to reconnect with their chapters if they haven't been connected. Just a perfect example, I went to Theta Pi's 175th anniversary a couple of weeks ago, and it was in their house, and it was great. The members were there, alums were there, they had national and regional officers there, and it was so exciting to see those alums reconnecting. And those fraternities and sororities, they need that. They need not just to hear the old stories, but they need to hear what are you doing in your career, and how can I make connections, and how do we make good decisions? So that's one. And then the other thing I would also mention is connect with your college and see if there are events, programs. I always love when alums are on a panel discussion because they can share their experiences. And it's real easy. You may share something and then students may follow up with you. So a lot of different opportunities, but just connects in some way, and we'll find a way to connect you to students without question.
Well, and that's something that I think you and I can also work on together to try to Absolutely. Think about how we can pull our two pieces together there, and we'll keep doing that. I look forward to having some more of those conversations with you. I look at the clock and I see that we're kind of getting close to the end of our committed time here together, and I thought maybe I could just end it here kind of in the way we began it. I asked you to think about some personal things and share some personal thoughts you had about what got you here. So let me just ask you, now that you're here, how is it? What have you found? What are some places that, just kind of stand out to you that you think, oh man, I love this place, or whatever? What is your feeling about being here? And what about some of those places or traditions or other things that really stand out to you now that you're in Ann Arbor?
Well, Steve, I am really glad that you're asking me this question now, Because if you asked me this question a year ago, I would say, I don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
All I know is my living room and the screen and an occasional run to a good restaurant to pick up takeout food.
Yeah.
But now it's it's been great. I'm like that second year student. I'm just getting out and exploring.
Yeah.
Going to the big house. I mean, I've been now 3 games out of the first 4, and that's just been amazing. I've never been to a stadium that large before, and to get the energy and the feeling of and the traditions of being in the big house. And I'm working on making sure I got the cadence to the fight song right, and all that good stuff. So that's been awesome. Just walking around, and I did this a little bit even during COVID, but the campus was pretty dead. But now walking around, through the Diag, or just walking down State Street, grabbing lunch, or going over to the Hill where, all those residence halls are out. And sometimes I actually go for my walks around the Hill area just in the evening, and just being able to do that. And then one of the things that is so cool about working on a college campus that we couldn't do during COVID is just attending events. Mm-hmm. In addition to the big house, I've got tickets to a volleyball game. I've got tickets to a band performance. Yep. The men's glee club contacted me. I said, "Yeah, I'm going. I'm going." And so just soaking in all those events, it's just so exciting. So, and then plus just Ann Arbor, just getting out more now and being able to experience things. So I'm getting out. You can't contain me anymore too much, and I'm doing it in a safe way. But I look forward to continue learning and experiencing Michigan and University of Michigan.
Well, I won't do you like it was done to me when I first started here. I was on a radio broadcast just a few weeks after I began, and the announcer thought it would be fun to kind of get some spirit going. It was at a football game. It was before a football game, and they turned to me and said, "So I'm sure you won't mind singing the fight song for us." And so I had this, I'm a horrible singer, but I had this vision of all of these alumni leaning closer to the radio to see what happened. And so I thought, I have no choice. Off I went. And I was terrible, but fortunately I was in a crowd and they all began to sing and nobody could hear me. So it was fine.
Well, I'm almost there. I'm almost there, Steve. I'll tell you, definitely by basketball season, I'll have it down. I got the cadence. And the problem is when I'm wearing a mask singing, no one can tell. So that pressure's not there. So once I take off the mask, I got to make sure I get it down. But I'm getting close. I'm real close.
Well, I'll tell you what, I would love to share some of my favorite places in Ann Arbor with you, and maybe we can get together and have dinner together, carry on this conversation, or just talk about our friend Jeff. But I'm really glad you're here. I can tell you've got the right ideas about how to lead for students to make their experience better, and I appreciate that. Any last thing that you have for us?
No, Steve, you have been so gracious reaching out to me, you and your staff, really trying to help me connect. I really appreciate it. I have loved having a great relationship with Alumni Association, and anything I can do to help as well. Whatever it is, let me know, whether it's a trip somewhere or just speaking to alums, definitely keep me connected, and I'm going to take you out on that dinner.
That sounds great. All right. Thanks again, and go blue.
Go blue. Absolutely.